Today, I'm going to be arguing that death is not a harm for the one who dies. And I'm going to be arguing this on the basis of the Epicurean argument that for an event to be a harm or to be harmful, there has to be a subject which exists to experience that harm. And once a person dies, there is no subject to exist or experience any harm. Therefore, death is not harmful because no subject exists to experience the harm. And to argue this point, I am going to look at the main counter arguments to the Epicurean view and discuss what I feel are gaps in these arguments. And the main arguments I'm going to review are Johansson's argument and Feight's argument. The first argument I'm going to discuss is Johansson's argument on why death is bad for us. And so basically, Johansson's argument rejects two common arguments put forth as to why death is not bad for us: the timing argument and the future well-being argument. The timing argument basically states that for an event to be harmful to an individual, it has to be harmful at a particular time. Since death is not harmful to an individual at any particular time, death is not harmful to us at all. And Johansson rejects the fact that an event, for it to be harmful, has to be harmful at a particular time. He says that events can be harmful even if they are harmful at no direct point in time. And then as for the future well-being argument, this argument states that for events to be harmful, they have to deprive the individual of they have to lower that individual's future well-being to cause harm. And since there is no subject after death to be deprived of well-being, then death cannot cause harm to anything because there's nothing there to cause harm to. And Johansson rejects both of these arguments by saying that death is not harmful to us at any particular point in time. It doesn't, not after death, it doesn't deprive us of future well-being, not before, but it is harmful to our overall lifetime well-being, just the comprehensive well-being level of the individual throughout their entire life. He argues that death does cause harm to that by lowering that comprehensive lifetime well-being level, even though there is no particular point in time at which death harms the individual. I would argue against Johansson's atemporalism for a few reasons. The first reason is that any event that affects an individual the effects of that event on the individual are going to change over time. And oftentimes the effects the same event has on the individual are going to change drastically over time. So I'm just going to use myself as an example. Let's say for about 6 years, I was addicted to drugs and suffered, sort of spiraled out due to various mental conditions, and let's call that the event, that 6-year period of time. Then around 2020, I got sober, and at that point, the event, the 6 years before then, had caused a great harm to me. I began to get sober. I had lost, my family, my friends, everything. I felt shame, I felt resentful, sadness. My well being was very low as a result of this event which had occurred. Then, maybe about 3 years later, now, I feel that the original event which occurred has led me on a journey which has given me a perspective, a purpose, a passion, a sense of self which I never before would have felt had that event never had occurred. So the same event which had caused a great harm to me now has greatly heightened my well-being. My well-being is much more heightened than before the event had ever occurred. So my point in saying this is that one event, even an event which can cause one's well-being to be very low, that can and often does drastically change over time. And my story is not a one-off to this. Many times people experience great hardship, which makes their well-being very low, and then later they would never want to remove that hardship from their life because it allows them to grow and learn and give them, this heightened sense of well-being down the line. So that's my first argument against it, is that to say that any event is a net positive or a net negative to one's overall lifetime well-being is very speculative given the nature of events and how they change over time. I do not believe anything can be timelessly good or timelessly bad, because one's well-being level is inherently indexed by time, and the same event is going to change over time. I also would say that any event which affects an individual and how we describe harm for anything is tied to time. The event harms you, I'd say time t. And Johansen did not give any other example as to any other event which harms or benefits a person and is not tied to time. And so I think if Johansen's going to say that death is atemporal, he needs to give other examples of things that may be atemporal, because why would we just assume that death is the only thing, the only event that acts in this way? I don't think that is a valid assumption without describing any other event that acts in such a way. And so those are my two arguments against Johansen's atemporalism. I would now like to go on to address Neophyte's argument, which is different than Johansen's argument. So Neophyte also rejects the timing argument that Epicureans put forth. However, he rejects a different premise. So rather than rejecting the premise in the timing argument that says for an event to cause harm, it needs to cause harm at a specific time, Fight accepts this. But he rejects the premise that says death does not cause harm at a specific time. Fight does think that death is a harm to the individual at the time after death, saying that death deprives the individual of a heightened well-being which they may have experienced after death. And he does this by saying that those who have died are still subjects who you can ascribe a well-being level of 0 to. And if that subject would have had a well-being level higher than 0, then death is depriving the subject of that well-being. I would like to argue against this claim that he makes that you can ascribe a well-being level to one who is dead. I would argue against that because to ascribe a well-being level to something, there has to be a subject. And I do not believe that Veit sufficiently argues that there is a subject when the person is dead. Just like if there was a fictional character, say Grimbo the Great. Grimbo the Great, people can refer to him, they can talk about Grimbo the Great, just as Veit says that people can talk about someone who's died. And he says that because we can talk about them, because we can refer to them and make claims about them, we can ascribe to them a well-being level. But we can talk about Grimbo the Great and we can, refer to him in our conversations. But can we ascribe a well-being level to Grimbo the Great? No, because there's no existing subject. Grimbo the Great is not an existing subject to which we can ascribe a well-being level to. In the same way, a person who has died, even though we can refer to them and make claims about them, is not an existing subject to whom we can ascribe a well-being level to. And that is my main critique against Veit's argument. Therefore, I do not believe anyone has put forth a sufficient counter-argument to the original Epicurean claims that death cannot be harmful because there is no individual subject to experience such harm after they have died. And for this reason, I do believe that death is not harmful to the individual who has died.